All right, hi. So I'm going to read, you probably can't see it because my camera is blurred. But this is The Mysteries of Pittsburgh by Michael Chabon. It's about basically a really messy dude in the summer of like 1986. So I will start reading you chapter one, and it is entitled Elevator Going Up. So at the beginning of summer, I had lunch with my father, the gangster, who was in town for the weekend to transact some of his vague business. We had just come to the end of a period of silence and ill will, a year I'd spent in love with and in the same apartment as an odd, fragile girl whom he had loathed on sight with a frankness and fury that were not all like him. But Claire had moved out the month before. Neither my father nor I knew what to do with our new freedom. I saw Lenny stirring this morning, he said. He asked after you. You remember your Uncle Lenny? Sure, I said. And I thought for a second about Uncle Lenny juggling three sandwich halves in the back room of his five and dime in the Hill District a million years ago. I was nervous and drank more than I ate. My father carefully dispatched his steak. Then he asked me what my plans were for the summer. And in a flush of some strong emotion or other, I said, more or less, it's the beginning of summer, and I'm standing in the lobby of a 1,000-story grand hotel where a bank of elevators a mile long, an endless red row of monkey attendants in gold braid wait on me. Not easy for me to flip the page. Okay, sorry. They wait to carry me up, up, up through. Sorry, it's hard for me to read like this tiny font in the dark. Hold a microphone real quiet. Sorry, sorry, sorry. We're on page two of your book. If you're reading at home, if you want to buy Mysteries of Pittsburgh and read along, and we can talk about it in the comments because I love this book. Anyway, let's get back to the book. Of being carried up, up, up through the suites of moguls, of spies, and of starlets, to rush me straight to the Zeppelin mooring at the Art Deco summit, where they keep the huge dirigible of August, tied up and bobbing in the high winds. On the way to the Shining Needle at the top, I will wear a lot of neckties. I will buy 5 or 6 works of genius on 40 RPM, and perhaps too many times, I will find myself looking at the snapped spine of a lemon wedge at the bottom of a drink. I said, I anticipate a coming season of dilated time and women of all in disarray. My father told me I was overwrought and that Claire had an unfortunate influence on my speech, but something in his face said that he understood. That night he flew back to Washington, and on the next day, for the first time in years, I looked in the newspaper for some lurid record of the effect of his visit. But of course, there was none. He wasn't that kind of gangster. Claire had moved out on the 13th of April, taking with her Oliver, Joni Mitchell, and the complete soundtrack recording of the dialogue from the Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, a 4 record set, which she knew by heart. At some point towards the sexless and conversationless finale of Art and Claire, I had informed her that my father said she was she suffered from dementia precox, and my father's influence upon me was strong, and I believed this. I later told people that I had lived with this crazy woman, and also that I had enough of Romeo and Juliet. The last term of my last year of college sputtered out in a week-long facility of examinations and sentimental. Sorry, let me get my breath. Of okay, sentimental alcoholic conferences with professors whom I knew I would not really miss. Even as I shook their hands, bought them beers, there was, however, a last paper on Freud's letters to Wilhelm Fleece, for which I realized I would have to make one exasperating last visit to the library. The dead core of my education, the white silent kernel of every empty Sunday I'd spent trying to ravish the faint charms of the study of economics, my sad and cynical major. So one day at the beginning of June, I came around the concrete corner that gave way to the marbleized steps of the library, walking the length of the brown ground floor Walking the length of the brown ground floor windows, I looked into them at the reflection of my walk, my loafers, my mess of hair, and then I felt guilty. Because at our lunch, my father, the amateur psychologist, had called me a devout narcissist and had said he worried I might be doomed to terminal adolescence. I looked away. There were very few students using the building this late in the term, which was officially over. A few pink-eyed and unshaven pages loitered behind the big checkout counter, staring out at the brown sun through the huge tinted windows. I clicked loudly in my loafers across the tiled floor. As I called for the elevator to the Freud section, sorry. A girl looked up. She was in a window. There was an aqua ribbon in her hair. The window was kind of a grill, as in a bank, at the far end of the corridor, which I stood waiting for the elevator. And the girl in the window held a book in one hand and a thin strip of wire in the other. We looked at each other for perhaps 3 seconds, and then I turned back to face the suddenly illuminated red up arrow, the muscles of my neck warming and tightening as I stepped into the car. I heard her say 4 distinct and strange words to someone with her. Then behind the bars with whom I had seen. That was him, Sandy, she said. I was sure of it. Freud's letters to Fleece make much of the neat cosmic interaction of the human race, or the human nose, with matters of sexual health. Sorry, the text is actually like a little bit faded. So let me try and read that sentence again. I apologize if you're listening and so engrossed in this novel. Freud's letter to Fleece make much of the near cosmic interaction of the human nose with matters of sexual health. Work on my paper therefore proved to be relatively entertaining, and I wrote for a long time, stopping rarely to drink from the humming fountain or even simply to look up from my hilarious scholarship. Late in the long afternoon, I saw a young man looking at me from behind his book. Its title was in Spanish, and on its cover there was a bloody painting of a knife, a woman in a mantilla, and a half-undressed brown strongman. I smiled at him and lifted an eyebrow in skeptical salute at what must be a pretty racy book. It looked as though he might keep his eyes on me a while longer, but I told myself that one of those kinds of exchanges a day, and that with a woman, was excitement enough, and I dropped back into the nose, nexus of all human desire. When I put down my pencil, it was almost 8 o'clock. I stood up with a habitual silent oi and went over to one of the tall, narrow windows that looked out over the plaza below. The sky was a whitish brown in the twilight through the smoked glass. Small groups of kids called and ran on the concrete down below, obviously heading somewhere, in a way that made me think of getting something to eat. At the far left, towards the front of the building, I saw a flashing light. I gathered up my books and papers and noticed that the Spanish potboiler guy had left. Where he'd been sitting, there was a small empty can of pineapple juice and a little scrap of origami that was like a dog or a saxophone. Going down in the elevator, I thought about how the girl behind the bars. But at ground floor, everything was closed up, and an articulated wooden shutter had been pulled down behind the grill. There was one disheveled drama type slumped behind the checkout counter now, and as I went clicking through the theft detectors, he waved me away without looking up. I stood feeling the air and smoking a nice cigarette for a little while, then heard the loud crack of police voices on radio and saw again that flashing light off to the left. Little bunches of people were there, balanced between walking and sticking around. I walked over and came through the outer ring of people. In the center of everything stood a young woman, her head slightly bowed, whispering. To her left, a fallen cop with a cut on his face pulled himself to his knees, then tried to stand, gesturing with unconvincing menace towards a huge boy. To the girl's right, across the impromptu arena we formed, stood another cop, his arm struggling to enlace of another huge boy, who swore at the policeman and at the girl, at his enraged twin who faced him and at all of us who watched. "Let me go, you fucker," he said. "You bitch, you fucker, you assholes, I'll kill you. Let me go." He was tremendous and fit. He tore away from his captor and with his short backward wrench that dropped the tiny blue cop onto the concrete. The two boys came closer to each other until they both stood within arm's length of the woman. I looked at her again, and she was slender and blonde, with green-eyed, small-nosed, nondescript kind of hillbilly face and a flowery skirt. She looked down at the sidewalk at nothing. Her thin ankles wobbled on 4-inch spikes, and her lips moved soundlessly. The two cops were both on their feet now, billy clubs drawn. There was a strange momentary lull in the action, as though the police and the giants were waiting for some kind of command from the dazed woman before grabbing for the various difficult things they had assembled to grab. It was suddenly cool and almost night. A new siren threatened and grew from the distance. The girl looked up, listening, and then turned toward the boy who just freed himself. She pressed against his great chest and clung. Larry, she said. The other boy undid his fist and looked at the two of them, towards us with tears in his eyes and an uncomprehending look on his face. Too bad, man, someone said. She picked Larry. Good going, Larry, said another. It was done. People clapped. The battered policeman rushed over. The reinforcements squealed up. Larry kissed his girl. One more Pittsburgh heartbreak, said a voice right beside me. It was Spanish potboiler. Hey, I said, yes, right. There's one for every kielbasa on Forbes Avenue. We moved together in a chattering. We moved off together in the general chattering retreat of those who weren't interested in seeing the actual arrests. When did you come in? He asked. There certainly was. Sorry, the word shadow. It's hard for me. Hope you're enjoying this ASMR video. There's some sarcasm in his tone, and yet at the same time, I thought it seemed as though he had been impressed or even shaken by what he had seen. He had short, white blonde hair, pale eyes, and a day's growth of beard, which lent his boyish face a kind of grown-up decadence. At the good part, I said. He laughed, one perfect ha. It was crazy, I continued. I mean, did you see that? I never understand how people can be perfectly frank all over the sidewalk like that in public. Some people, he said, really know how to have a good time. Even the first time I heard author Lecomte employ that phrase, I already had the faint impression that it functioned for him as a slogan. There was a readier dowser reverb to his voice as he pronounced it. We exchanged names and shook hands over the fact that we were both named Arthur. Meeting a namesake is one of those most delicate and most brief of surprises. But they call me Art, I said. And they call me Arthur, he said. At Forbes Avenue, Arthur started left, his head half turned to the right, towards me, his right shoulder lingering slightly behind him as though he waited for me to catch up, or was reaching back to hook me and carry me along. He wore a white evening short, still brilliant despite the weakening of daylight, of an extravagant, baggy vintage cut, which billowed out over the top of his blue jeans. He stopped and seemed on the petulant point of tapping his foot impatiently. I had no doubt he was gay. Sorry if you weren't expecting this is a gay, it's a gay novel. I had no doubt that he was gay, that he was taking advantage of our having crossed paths to make good his short initial attempt in the library, that he probably supposed that I was a homosexual as he. People made this mistake. Which way you were going anyway, before you ran into Jules and Jim back there, he said. Jules and Larry, I said. I have a dinner with a friend, my old girlfriend. I bit off hard at the girl and spat it at him. He came back to me, extending his hand, and we shook for the second time. Well, I work in the library, acquisitions. I'd be glad if you stopped by. He spoke stiffly, with an odd courtesy. Sure, I said. I thought momentarily of Claire, and the dinner she might be preparing for me, if only I hadn't invented it, and if only the mere sight of me didn't make her stomach collapse in distress. What time are you supposed to be at your friend's? Arthur asked, as though we had not shaken hands at all, and I were not yet free. 8:30, I lied. Does she live very far from here? Near Carnegie Mellon. Oh well, it's hardly 8 o'clock. Why don't we have a beer? She wouldn't care. She's your old girlfriend anyway. His emphasis lay on the syllable before girl. I had to choose between drinking with a fag. Sorry. I had to choose between drinking with a fag and saying something inexpert, such as, I mean 8:15. Or, well, gee, I don't know. He made me afraid of seeming clumsy or dull. It was not as though I had any firm or fearful objections to homosexuals. In certain books by gay writers, I thought I'd appreciated the weight and secret tremble of their thoughts, and I admire their fine clothes and shrill hard wit, their weapon. was only that I felt keen to avoid, as they say, a misunderstanding. And yet, just that morning, while watching a procession of scar-faced, big-breasted, red-wrap laughing African girls tap dance down Ward Street, hadn't I for the 15th time berated myself for my failure to encounter, to risk, to land myself in novel and incomprehensible situations, to misunderstand, in fact? And so, with a fatalistic shrug, I went to drink one beer. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, I mean, this is a gay book, and they say that word. I hope they don't. YouTube doesn't yell at me. Um, I'll end there. So that was chapter one. If you'd like me to read chapter two, please like, comment, and subscribe. Do your big one, like, comment, and subscribe. It gets spicy in that book. Bye.